Hello, everybody. You're watching Let's Talk About Prepping. I'm Tyler, your host, and under extreme duress, I have returned to make another video. This video is a video response to Palmetto Prepared and Ontario Homestead concerning 10 questions about how prepared I am. These are some pretty good questions. They're not your usual questions that are meant to simply flex on how prepared you are. They're actually getting at the root of some things that we should really be thinking about, things that some people glaze over when discussing how prepared they are. This is a good exercise. I think everybody should sit back and ask themselves, in all actuality, if they are as prepared as would be necessary to say yes to these questions. So I'm going to try to be brutally honest with you guys as to whether or not I can match this standard. So question 1, do you have 6 months worth of food and water? Now, yes and no. I'm absolutely confident that I have 6 months worth of food and water that my family will survive living off of just what we have. Now, will we be healthy and fit and at the same level of health at the end of that as we were at the beginning? Maybe not. We do have plenty of food that I don't think we would have to ration too hard living just off of it, but ideally we'd be able to supplement it with foraging, things that we're growing, or meat. Now, if that's not the case, if it's a true locked in your house situation, it might be uncomfortable, but again, I'm confident that we would not die, especially considering that you can starve for almost that period of time, and while there will be very severe long-term health consequences, you will survive. And water, you can't go that long without it, but I do have a pretty fair store of hundreds of gallons of water. And that is perhaps one of the most important points that we have here, because it has always been a matter of certainty for me that preppers do not have enough water. It's the perennially ignored prep. And that's the first thing that's going to get most people. Question 2, 6 months of general supplies. Now, this one is definitely a no. I would say that I have 6 months worth of the mainline things, the things that everybody thinks about. Paper products, so just all of the accoutrements to life. But in reality, there are a lot of those things that are the luxuries of modern life. A lot of the things that we feel like we need, we could actually do without. They just greatly increase our comfort and convenience. But on the other hand, there are a lot of things that we take for granted that we don't appreciate enough that we go through over a 6-month period without even realizing it. And a lot of those things that we take for granted that we can go without for long periods of time because it's a $3 purchase at Walmart and we can just go pick it up in the time period that we need it. Those are the kinds of things that you will not be able to simply go pick up, and which you will quickly find that you should not have taken for granted, that are actually very important to living a comfortable life, but which, because of the day of convenience that we have now, you can go without for long periods without really feeling the sting of it. So I would say no, that there are certainly things in a 6-month period that I would greatly miss because they were overlooked, because it's an obscure enough item that I haven't consciously considered the fact that I may need that over a given period of time. Number 3, would you be able to turn people away? This is something that I think about a lot. This is something that I've touched on in recent videos. The inclination to help people, to have empathy, versus the necessity of having a hardened heart in situations where people are starving, essentially. Now, hopefully none of us ever have to face United States where we have to deal with many of our countrymen starving, but that is a reality in plenty of places around the world, and there are plenty of reasons why we could see that here. So if we're ever in a situation where people are seeking relief and I'm able supposedly to provide it, it would be a very difficult decision to turn people away. Now, I'm assuming that this isn't a situation where there is a threat to my well-being, my family's well-being, by letting these people in. Obviously, I don't have an overabundance if there are a lot of people who are starving, essentially, or having such a hard time that they're seeking relief from strangers. And in that situation, I think most people, honestly, no matter how good we think we are going to be a lot more selfish than we anticipate. Because when it comes down to it, none of us have been hungry. Well, most of us probably have not been hungry, truly hungry, and with a certainty that it may well go on and lead to our starvation. Especially if you have kids or people that you care about more than yourself. When death is truly on the line, when it's staring you in the face, it's going to be much easier to be a cold-hearted person than most of us have had the opportunity to be in this soft world that we live in here in the United States. So, on one hand, I think that a lot of people will be colder and crueler than they anticipate. I think that a lot of people have more faith in themselves as the good guy or the hero of the story. And that when it comes down to it, they'll do some things that may scare even themselves. On the other hand, I think that a lot of people, because of our empathy, even though it may not seem like it, when it really comes down to it, again, in our modern sheltered American world, many people have not really had to face the cold realities that people in other countries do who live closer to the edge of death, essentially. And so we may not have that aloofness that is necessary to watch somebody suffer their fate. And I think that a lot of people, and probably myself included, will find it very difficult to abandon someone to their fate, and will likely try to help people, even if it guarantees the helper's death, long before they realize it. Because in a grid down situation where there is no supply chain to save you, you need to have the next winter's food and the next harvest season's food ready each year. And if you don't, that pretty much means your death. That's how it's been in subsistence cultures throughout history. And so if you are just barely scraping by, and especially if you don't realize that you're just scraping by, if you think you have much more than you really do, and you start to take on more mouths to feed, and you don't have a system set up wherein those new mouths directly produce for themselves immediately, then you will have doomed your group long before you necessarily realize what is going to happen. And so it's very important to consider every action in the longest term consequences that it may have every time you take some kind of action like that. And will I have the ability to? I definitely like to think that I would. I'm a very practical and analytical person. And while I'm very empathetic, I also have a very cold and practical streak to me that does not allow me to lie to myself or to ignore the practical decision. And especially whenever the people who mean more to me than myself are on the line, that's not a decision I'll really have a problem making. But it is definitely something that will tear me up and give me a lot of problems as it happens. So it's definitely something I think about a lot, and I think it's a very good thing to consider for yourself, and not just in the surface, fantasizing, daydreaming kind of fashion. I mean, to truly ask yourself, will you be able to turn people away? By what factors will you be able to turn people away? Will you be able to turn away a cousin or a brother-in-law or sister-in-law who you know will be a detriment? Because some people you can know will cause either so much infighting or outright bad decisions and dangerous decisions that you just cannot allow them near your family in a dangerous or risky or high-stakes situation. And that may involve some substantial drama if it means causing family rifts and things like that. And it's one of the most important things to consider, to really try to forecast who you think is going to end up on your doorstep, or whose doorstep you may end up on, and what are the consequences of those dynamics. And what are you going to do or be able to do in those situations? So, will I be able to turn people away? Yes, I will lean towards turning people away. Because in these situations, it will be a very ugly world, almost certainly. And while we need to be able to produce community, to be able to not just save who we can, but to actually build towards having, I mean, because you need to have some sort of community or society, and that needs to be more than just 10 or 20 people. And humanity will not live for generations as scattered, isolated compounds. It just won't happen. So you always need to consider the long-term ramifications as well as the immediate and practical consequences of your choices. Number 4, are you 25% self-sufficient? No. No, I am not. Not at all. I currently am leaning towards more of the stocking style of prepper, just given my living situation, renting and not on the homestead that I was aiming towards years ago. And while my extended community family group definitely is closer to that, it is incredibly difficult to do. And if you are not actively working towards it, which means committing basically all of your energy and your entire life towards self-sufficiency, it's something that quickly slips through your fingers. So there is some shame in admitting that I'm not at all self-sufficient, except for in some of the ways that my area allows me to be. I would not rely on anybody for water and under any circumstance except for currently living on the grid. I can provide food. I'm close enough to wilderness that I'm not dependent on anybody for my scavenging or foraging needs beyond what I currently store. But as for having the full self-sufficient setup, having acreage and farm and everything that goes with being purely self-sufficient, no. But that is the goal. Number 5, heating and cooling backups. Yes. Where I live, you really don't need to worry about the heat except for maybe one day of the year it reaches triple digits. As for the cold, which is the main factor the rest of the year, yes, I have multiple wood stoves. They are here at the house with everything I need to set them up should that situation occur. And I have a stash of wood and more available to me nearby. So heating, totally covered. Even aside from that, I've got propane heaters, generator, and various levels of heating backups, because around here, this isn't a eventuality or a fantasy. You go without power every few years here, and with how long and how cold it can stay, you definitely need something so that you don't end up living in a hotel somewhere, which is very expensive and which I just watched many of my local neighbors do recently when parts of the town were out of power for a week. So, yes, heating, taken care of, cooling, unnecessary in my locale. Medical. No, in any serious fashion, no. I've got boo-boo band-aids and some gunshot wound stuff, but really not anything that I would need for serious wounds or sustained medical care at any real level. Like I said, I've started to fill out my kits and, check my checklists. I do have family members with medical needs that I'm not able to provide for, so while it's something that we're quickly trying to address now that everybody's fully on board with the prepping, given the past year, it's not the best situation, to be honest. But we do what we can. Am I mentally prepared? I would say that it might be hubris to say that yes, I'm mentally prepared, but I'm as mentally prepared as I can help myself to be. And I actively do what I can to put myself in the mindset of the situations in a realistic fashion, the situations that I project that I might find myself in. And while it's incredibly depressing, yes, I do what I can to be mentally prepared for where I might find myself. I think that mental preparedness is incredibly important. And I think that one of the strongest factors, one of the greatest reassurances that a person can have is to know who they are at rock bottom. And that's something that I can definitely say I have a certainty of. Um, if you don't know what you'll do when you're pretty much emotionally and mentally in your worst state, when you're beleaguered by the world, knowing that it's reassuring because you don't have to wonder what's going to come out of the back of your brain whenever you're in an ugly situation. So, yes, I'm as mentally prepared as I think I can be, uh, short of having a communism survivor as a personal mentor. But that's something to think about. Can you punish group members? This is a very delicate subject. Yes, I think I can. I have confidence in my abilities as a leader. I've been a manager for over half of my life, and I can say with confidence that I am not just a manager or a boss, but that I know how to be a leader. Um, I've gotten reassurance from those who I've had that relationship with, and it is a very difficult thing. Um, People are very sensitive in their ego, and I don't mean that in a condescending way. I just mean that people are all living from their own perspective, and that's all that most people have. And it's very difficult to not only lead, but especially punish people without making situations worse and with it being effective and just with everything that comes into it, because the purpose of punishment is to achieve the desired outcome. If you're doing it for retribution or vengeance, then I guess that's your prerogative, but it's not going to produce positive results that keep you from ending up in the situation that you're supposedly trying to get out of. So, can I punish people? Yes. Am I certain in what that will entail in every situation that I'll face? Absolutely not. I consider a lot what the best courses of punishment will be in certain situations where you're on your own. And that's a discussion that I would love for some of us to be having, because I don't, well, I wonder often about the effects of exile or the effects of corporal punishment or the effects of capital punishment in a world where people's worldviews become unhinged and there perhaps is no higher authority in their minds beyond what can be made. And a lot of our context for how people react to punishment in our world now will be lost. It may be hard to know how people and those who care about those people will react to certain punishments. Do I have the confidence to go for it? Yes, I do. Do I worry about it? Absolutely. And I think that if you're not worried about the effects of your actions as a leader, then you're not doing it right. So I'd love to have that discussion with some of you guys. Could you survive a 3-month lockdown? Don't tempt me with a good time. I know that that probably sounds silly given the past year, but it's been a very, very busy year for me. And I've got more than 3 months worth of books that I'd like to read, and at least 3 months worth of supplies that I could live off of. And so, yes, again, while I admit that it's probably hubris to say, yeah, give me a 3-month lockdown, especially with all of the uncomfortableness that will almost certainly come with that. When I look at what I've got, I would go for it. I mean, I could almost go for it as a video series and prep test, because 3 months is definitely the kind of period of time where you can find the gaps in your preps and have them hurt you enough to really get your ass in line when you get out of it. So, yeah, I would definitely survive a 3-month lockdown. It might be uncomfortable enough to teach me a good lesson if I'm wrong, but I don't think that it would be too bad given my current situation. As for mentally and etc., yeah, I've been crazy and depressed and unemployed for more than 3 months, stuck in a mini home that I built. So yeah, I think I could probably handle that nowadays, sure. Addictions. Do I have addictions? I am very addicted to coffee. I drink probably, well, it's hard to say because I drink espresso and coffee, but close to 10 cups some days. I really love some coffee. I do vape. Some days I forget to. I have a very strange relationship with nicotine. While I guess most people would say that yes, I do have an addiction relationship with it. It is something that I drop and pick up without much consequence. So no, not too worried about that. And aside from that, while I do dabble here and there, again, my relationship with addictive substances thus far, probably because of my childhood exposure to medication, I don't have a hard time getting myself off of things or going through the withdrawal process, which is a process, and I'm not being flippant. I definitely do have to exert mental exercise in stopping doing something like that. But no, nothing that I have any concern over affecting my abilities or mental state in a grid down or high stakes situation. So those are the 10 questions that have been asked of me. That's the video. Thank you everybody for pressuring me to make a video. It is very reassuring and very heartwarming to know that there are people who enjoy having me have this conversation with you, and enough to ask more from me, even after months of me being not lazy, but unmotivated and having writer's block. So thank you to all of you. Thank you, Tony, for tagging me. And I hope you're all doing well out there. And everybody, stay safe.